I want process efficiency at every step. Like, how much am I losing when I'm milling it? How much am I losing when I'm decarbing it? How much am I losing in extraction, in winterization? And so we've just built these models that tell us, like, where are we losing product? And then based on where you're losing the most product, you zone in and understand, like, why.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to an episode of The Dime. I'm Brian Fields. With me, as always, is Kellen Finney. And this week, we've got a very special guest, Mario Naric, CEO and founder of Motif Labs. Mario, thanks for taking the time. How are you doing today?
Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it. I'm doing really well.
Excited to have you here. Kellen, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Really excited to talk to Mario. Really excited to talk Canada and extracts and how the Canadian market is doing these days. How are you doing, Brian?
Yeah, I'm excited. I think there's a lot of scaling that we're going to get into today and some of the fun nitty gritty. And it turns out that profitability is a key driver for what we are today, but going forward. And I'm excited to kind of get Mario's take on that. But before we kind of dive into some of the fun topics, we've got a little East Coast, West Coast battle. And I guess the way to describe it is if you had to want to visit a city you hadn't visited enough, is there a city in the East or West Coast of the United States that you would prefer?
Yeah, I think it's biased because I haven't spent a ton of time on the East Coast, but I'm choosing San Diego, I'm choosing Vancouver. It gives you the slowed down pace, but not so slow. I actually just went to the East Coast of Canada, and it's like it's beautiful, but I'll go there 10, 15 years maybe when I've slowed down a bit.
Yeah, I love it. I tried to pull it out, but maybe
really
we can sneak it.
Leading question.
There are no leading questions. So Mario, let's dive into your background, kind of how you got into the cannabis space and the origin of Motif.
Yeah, sure. I'll give you the high level, and then we can dig in. But I'm a process engineer. I went to school for chemical engineering, and I worked in oil and gas out of school. And I did actually a bit of management consulting as well. So yeah, I was working at a refinery at the time of like conceiving of this idea. It was like 2016 when I started thinking about it. Saw that the legislation was coming, saw that everybody was fixated on growing. I don't know anything about growing anything. I've never learned about that, but I'm very comfortable with, pumps and pipes and metal. And when I started realizing that everything's becoming extract based, a buddy and I went to Oregon and Washington back then, and they were already making all sorts of fun stuff. The guy I'd never heard of, we realized at the beginning point of anything that isn't obviously flower was this extraction process. And then we realized that this extraction process is very much up our alley in terms of our expertise, right? Like it's pretty much refining, right? Like you take oil and gas, we take crude trim that nobody wants, and then we turn it into, liquid gold. And like, instead of making jet fuel, now we're making like vape fuel. So same difference. But I kicked it off back then as a B2B business, and then, zoom forward a few years, and we're definitely more of a brand business that participates in B2B as well.
Were there a ton of similarities when you were kind of getting started, or were there surprises? Obviously, given your previous background, there's a lot of advantages you bring to the table, but there might have been some unknowns that kind of surprised you along the way, maybe some differences between the two, or were they a lot more similar than most people would realize?
Oh, the experience was very different. I mean, just fundamentally, like the technologies for extracting cannabis, they've been around for a long time, right? So none of them were very foreign. CO2 extraction has been around for decades, in decaffeination and in extracting essential oils. Distillation, I was running distillation. So the technologies, they're all kind of there, but it's a very different industry. Like couldn't be more different, right? Like oil and gas is archaic. It's like a dinosaur. You can't change anything. The equipment's been there for 100 years, and like everything's a huge safety hazard. So that's what kind of really killed my desire. Like I'm very much about, I want the new, fun, exciting, and cannabis was the exact opposite. It was, put the technology aside, the industry is just couldn't be more opposite, and that's why I love it. That's why I made the jump.
So when you first decided to do extraction, there's CO2, there's, of course, hydrocarbons, there's ethanol, all of these in other botanical industries, right? Palm oil industry, like you said, decaffeination of coffee. How did you settle on hydrocarbon, and did you kind of play with all of them? Kind of talk us through those first few days that led to you guys choosing the technology and your current platform.
Yeah, that brings me way back. That's like the questions I was asked when I was raising my first round. Like, what's your IP? How are you making the oil? Which is fun. We actually started with CO2. Like we started with CO2 for a couple of reasons, right? Ethanol and hydrocarbon have a lot of safety hazards. So like the building code becomes pretty complex and expensive. And lengthy, like it was speed that we needed. So CO2 is a very low hazard kind of tech. We didn't need to do this crazy stuff to get it installed. And then two, it had been around a long time. Like a lot of people kind of bought these brands that popped up as a result of cannabis, but we went to companies that had been making CO2 extractors for like decades, and their technology was really, really good, and it was highly automated and really kind of, relatively speaking, simple to get going. It was a great basis for us. Everybody was kind of challenging us. Hey, distillate's commodity. I'm like, the industry hasn't even started, and distillate's going to be like 80% of the industry. Like, not yet, And then the people that really doubled down on the niche extracts out of the gate really struggled because, that market's still not even where it needs to be in Canada. And like 5 years ago, it was non-existent. So, we just saw it in the data. CO2 makes good distillate. Distillate makes up 80% of the market. Like, we're going to do that at scale at a low cost, and then we'll go from there.
That's one of the really difficult balances in an industry as challenging as cannabis, is building a business that can be sufficient and profitable today based on data, but also with an eye for the future. Because if you are too far out into the future, you may not have that window to survive to when the industry adapts. So kind of balancing that out, is that part of the process of understanding, okay, we started with CO2. I want to get into the hydrocarbon because from some of the estimates of the capacities, it's a big jump. So was that the expectation? Was that we got CO2 locked in, we're going to take it up a notch and go BHO?
Yeah, for us, it's always been focus, execute, and once that's stabilized, add on at that point. So for us, CO2 was diverse enough, right? When you started, I mean, nobody even had good flower that could make live resin vapes. So it was a moot point. Like, you couldn't make a live resin vape, and if you wanted to, you have to pay like whatever it is, $8 a gram of flower times 6 grams. Like, nobody's paying you $200 for a vape. So it just didn't work back then. And it gave us that really broad range because we toll process, we made bulk distillate for people, and then we made some pretty basic distillate products to start. Now, I mean, fast forward, we've been operating now for 4 years, which is a long time in cannabis. Coincidentally, when I say it, it doesn't sound that long, but we've been licensed for 4 years. And now it's like, okay, distillate's established. We have the capacity to make like 1.5 tons of distillate a month. Like, we can make 1,500 kilos of distillate a month. Like, it's clockwork. I barely think about that business unit anymore. Like, it's just ripping, it's automated, it's efficient. And the industry is starting to open up. We have 22% of the vape market. And probably now we have liquid diamonds, which are starting to really pop for us. But like up until like 3 months ago, probably 95% of that was distillate for us. But now that we're getting into liquid diamonds, which we can talk about, and live resin's becoming like a viable product category, Motif's going big into hydrocarbon to expand our capabilities and expand our addressable market. The timing is right. Like, we've never been first, but we tend to hit best when we focus, right? So that's going to be the same strategy for hydrocarbon.
So you guys seem a very data-driven organization. And so was this always kind of on the roadmap in terms of expanding your product portfolio into other solvent-based methods, right? To kind of capture more of the market. And on top of that, I think that like you said, the early days, hard to find boutique flower, hard to find, or expensive, right? No one's going to pay for these. So as the market matured, is that stuff that you guys watch like on your data, watching how consumer preferences are changing to then strategically start to now insert some of these higher end products into the market? Is that kind of how those decisions are getting made?
Yeah, I like these questions. They're deep. I'm into it. It is. It's all of the above, right? It's the benefit that we've had being private and nimble, and like my whole team's here, right? Like, I'm the founder, I'm still the CEO. Like the first 10 people that started this place with me are still like here, and they've, they run the place. And so we all stay very tight on everything, and we never overinvest, and we always hedge our bets, right? So it's like, we didn't install a $3 million hydrocarbon 4 years ago because it was like, that's a lot of money. I'd rather be like slightly less efficient per kilo and get the sales and then scale afterwards. And that's always been our motto. So it's just been a combination of what's the market asking for from us, then what's the model saying? Like, what does a vape have to sell at? What are the inputs right now? Does it make sense? Can I get it consistently? Can somebody give me the biomass? Like, yes, no. Do I have the bandwidth? Right? Like, we've been ripping with distillate for the last like 3 years. And every time we went to go and want to allocate CapEx to hydrocarbon, one, the market wasn't there, the flower wasn't there, and we didn't have the bandwidth to do it well. Right? And it's a very like relatively dangerous technology. Like, you have to really focus in on it. So yeah. So what we saw was leading indicators that like, okay, this makes sense. We're ready, right? Our team is stable. We can install it. We see a viable market for it. And we actually started very unique. We can talk about it. Like, our entry into hydrocarbon has been very different than what you would think, which I can expand on a bit.
Please.
Like, we've always wanted to go into hydrocarbon. Like, we weren't from 8 years ago. I'm like, we're going to be there. But even to this day, the flower is not quite where it needs to be consistently if you're not a grower. So even to this day, it's still like we're just getting into live resin. What we did was we spent the first, 12 to 14 months perfecting a process that makes THCA crystals, like which then turn into liquid diamonds at scale. So like if you kind of see all these like Instagram videos, which are really cool and fun to look at, but all these mason jars and, shit sitting in vacuum ovens and like taking 40 days to turn into diamonds and sauce. Like, yeah, it looks cool, but it's like very inefficient. and it's not.
You don't think jar tech is cutting edge?
40
Yeah,
days.
no, that's not the thing, man. Like whenever I saw a mason jar, I'm like, until I can figure out something better, I'm not launching a mason jar thing.
It's crazy that they literally call it jar tech.
State of the art.
Trust me, I've been deep into the forums, and there's a lot of misinformation down there. But we like literally, man, when you open our extractor, we put cannabis in, and out comes like 99.9% pure THCA crystals, like a little bit of post processing, and we're cranking them now. So like nobody's gonna be able to keep up with us on diamonds. And that's behind us. And now we're selling a lot of that, which has created a base for us to expand hydrocarbon and start running tests on live resin. And really what we're focusing on with live resin is reciprocal partnerships with growers. Like to me, to really own live resin, you need great extraction paired with great flower. And those two things need to come together to win. And so for us, the hydrocarbon part of it is really like a B2B opportunity to start on the live resin side, and then we're going to start introducing our own strains as we secure our like supply chain.
Are there tools and technology that you've used in your previous life with ExxonMobil and the refinery that you can apply here in order to get some of those numbers? Because we've heard from some other extractors that their numbers are not in that ballpark. They're a little more inefficient. So I was curious, are there certain tools that you've used or experience that you've applied here that's helped you kind of overcome some of these unknowns?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's less tools and more just like engineering principles, right? So when I started, I brought in like my two key ops leaders worked with me at Exxon, and like one was a highly technical like engineer that like she's just an absolute animal. Her name's Anna, like the smartest person I know, smartest engineer I know. And then there's another individual, Lucy, who was like a lab technician manager. So that's just like in our DNA. And I've been trained to be an engineer, so it's like I want process efficiency at every step. Like how much am I losing when I'm milling it? How much am I losing when I'm decarbing it? How much am I losing in extraction, in winterization? And so we've just built these models that tell us like, where are we losing product? And then based on where you're losing the most product, you zone in and understand like why, and then you just tackle that project, right? And one of the things we did early days was we, essentially retrofit our extractors, our CO2 extractors, to inject ethanol in there. So we were able to like cut our extraction time. We were able to like double our capacity with like a $75,000 investment and like 2 months of engineering. And it was sweet. Like when you find those things, you're like, oh yeah, here we go. Like this is taking us to the next level. I don't need to buy $3 million more of equipment. I just need like 50 grand of pumps, and we're going to crank out the oil. So we've been doing that like every step of the way.
It's pretty wild what thermodynamics actually, how well it works, right?
It was so funny. Like I went to a bunch of labs down there, and it was just a bunch of people that loved cannabis, just like feeling their way through it. I remember the first time somebody showed me cannabis distillation, and they were just like, yeah, like just when it starts like bubbling like kind of a lot, then I just like, I do this thing, and I'm like, there's a science to all this. It's temperatures, pressures, flow rates.
They're related
like,
too. Did you know that? Temperature and pressure related.
This is, sorry to burst your bubbles, but extraction is not an art form. It's very much science. Like it's full science.
I think that is the best explanation of like the cannabis process that I've had, because we've had conversations with people who said it's a feel aspect, exactly like you described. And then I asked him, I was like, well, what happens when you're sick? He's like, well, it's like it doesn't go as well. And it's like, well, that seems to be a problem we have for a sustainable business.
No. I mean, there's a know-how. There's a know-how that you figure out, especially when you get into like live resins and picking cultivar that are going to generate yields and stuff. Like there is like it's a little more art to that. But even that's just like give me all of your fresh frozen samples, and I'm going to run a matrix, and then I'll get my yields. I'll do a sensory. Okay, these 3 things yielded well and they taste good, and like we're going to rip with those. It's all science, man. And so that's what we did. Right. That's all we did. On the technology side, we didn't overcomplicate it. People were like buying these huge washing machines with like ultrasonic, whatever. It's like, no, the technology exists. It works. It's like tried and true. And we didn't, jar tech our way through it. We built some Excel spreadsheets at the very least. But yeah, it's all spreadsheets, man. Math.
So I guess putting together the piece of the puzzle, it makes sense now from a capacity standpoint when you're doing the quadrupling. I want to make sure from a capacity standpoint I'm accurately describing, because that's a big jump, right? Take us through the sizing of what you were kind of forecasting out, and then how you selected kind of the capacity of what you want to do from the BHO standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. So we always pilot, we walk before we run, we prove out the model, we prove out the technology. So we started with one really small hydrocarbon room, whatever, 10 by 10 feet or something, maybe even a little bit bigger, and one relatively small extractor. And on that thing, we perfected the THCA process. 6 months ago, we were making 20 kilos a month out of that little rig. And now that thing's up to 100 because we've just perfected it. And that's quite a bit. And that's on one shift. All the while, though, we knew we needed quite a bit more than that. So we had a second room that was phased in behind it. So essentially, we've now got two rooms. We bought a set of equipment that allows us to rapidly kind of 4x our current throughput. So we'll be in the neighborhood of being able to make, 300 to 400 kilos worth of, pick whether it's liquid diamonds or live resin, it's going to be interchangeable. And the decision for that was only like 20% more than doubling it. And we have a lot of demand on the liquid diamond side, and we have a lot of different outputs. Like, even if none of that works, I can make crude out of it and turn it into distillate. I can throw hemp into it and turn it into CBD isolate. So it's a very, like, extraction's a very diversified, de-risked thing, but like the pipeline's huge. Like, we're selling a crazy amount of liquid diamonds. Everybody wants a piece of it. And then a lot of our LP grow partners want us to help them make live resin. So we're pretty well sold out. Like, we just got to get them in and get going.
So when you're scaling and you have all this demand and there's this whole global movement where Canada is actively exporting to other countries, right? How do you kind of choose the size that you're going to build it to, right? With this current demand, you're like, well, if the US opens, now my demand's going to 10x. Like, how do you balance that capital investment with your current demand? Like, talk us through all of those kind of mental.
Yeah. The thing is, like, the way that we've always, like, our philosophy has always been, like, if you actually, like, dissect what it takes to launch something, right? There's usually something that's relatively cheap, that's relatively long lead that you want to move forward with. Right. And then as you get closer and closer and closer, you need to balance lead time and investment risk. Right. So what we did was we got a facility that was 20,000 square feet, and we had a right of first refusal on another 20. So we had like solidified 40,000 square feet, but we only used 10,000. And like over the span of the first 20, 2 years, we're like, oh, I thought it was going to be a nightmare to fill up the 15,000 square feet I built out. Like 18 months later, we were busting at the seams in 40,000. Right. So then we got to a scale where we got another facility. It's 75,000 square feet. We just got it licensed. I mean, I don't need more than 15,000 of those square feet, but it takes a year to get it licensed. It takes all of that. So you're constantly moving parallel paths, but you're leaving them flexible enough to pivot, right? Like, if you asked me a year ago, like, how would I use the spare space? I wouldn't have said that I'd be rolling my own joints. But fast forward now, because I have the space, I was able to get a couple joint rolling machines at like 20 cents on the dollar. We ran into a bunch of risks with outsourcing rolling pre-rolls, and now we're rolling, 30% of our own joints, and we're, moving that up. So it's you just remain nimble, but you have to model it. It's a lot of back and forth. It's a lot of cash flow kind of conversations. It's a lot of like risk mitigation, but do not overcommit on a massive investment without enough market validation. I mean, I don't know. It just sounds like it's just business principles.
I think it's important, especially in a hyper growth market. And I think one of the aspects that I've appreciated about watching your business is that you've learned lessons from some of maybe the other companies in Canada previously who've kind of accelerated as fast as possible. And do you think that has been helpful for you in understanding kind of like what the market has played out in Canada, what people have done maybe not the right way, and what you think is necessary in order to learn from those lessons to set yourself up to be flexible in nature, but also accelerate with the changings of the times?
Absolutely. Look, it's crazy to look back at some of that stuff and understand, how were some of those decisions made, right? But there was a point in time where taking a photo of like a piece of equipment that nobody knows whether it works or not could make your share price pop like $20 million, right? And so like, you get caught up in that, right? Because I remember when I was going out to raise my first round, my competitors at the time were like MetaPharm and Valens. And they both had market caps of like $750 million. And it was like, hey, we added this PhD to our scientific advisory board. And it was like, oh, now it's $800 million. Like that guy's clearly worth 50 million. So it was just crazy, right? And like, so people just kept investing in these crazy things. We never had that luxury, right? Like we were a little bit later. We were never public. Our investors don't mess around. Like they're successful entrepreneurs. We're privately held. Like there was no room to take these outlandish bets, and there was no rewards for taking outlandish bets. Like the reward was get profitable and like don't waste the money I just gave you on stupid shit. Like that's how it went, right? And so we did definitely benefit from seeing the rise and fall like of some of the things that happened before we got licensed. I believe we benefited from not being public. It's frustrating. It's like if I had the business I had now, like 3 years ago, it'd be like worth $3 trillion or something based on those metrics. But
bigger than Apple.
it would have been crazy, and we did get the benefit of that. We actually also saw into how the B2B market like was unfolding as we were getting licensed, and that's why we actually very quickly pivoted to private labeling. So we went B2B, then we started like white labeling. We brought up some US brands. We brought some legacy market brands to the legal market, and that was like how we stayed profitable and grew, because B2B didn't quite work well at the beginning. And then that ultimately ended up getting us to our own brands, which has been super fun transition for me, like personally and professionally.
So let's talk about that, because I think that's a staple that I'm curious to know. Like the intention was kind of extraction. It seemed like your skill set was in branding and kind of customer sales, and that's a completely different beast. So was there other people you brought on in order to expand that role? Was that something you thought originally? Or take us through when you realized that was going to be a key piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, early days, when I started this, I was the chief operating officer. So I actually like designed the process. I got the license, and the board made me the CEO. It's coming on like 3 years now. Pretty early on, I knew that we needed our own products and brands. And pretty early on, I saw that like, look, like we're getting pitched white label deals all the time. Like they have good ideas. Are they better than ours? Like maybe not, like when you start seeing, hey, this is what everyone's coming up with, because we saw what the LPs wanted. We saw what, some of our brand partners wanted. We're like, well, we can actually find our own place in this, right? So the biggest thing at the beginning was convincing the board that like we aren't just going to kill our other business units. So yeah, to me, it was like, as I started exploring it, I realized I have good ideas. A couple of my people that work with me had good ideas. We started embarking on that. We started with a CBD forward brand back when nobody was focusing on it, because I'm like, okay, let me just prove this concept to you guys without being competitive to anybody. And so we showed we can make money, pretty good money on a CBD brand. We got listings really quickly. And then we really came up with the brand that I've always wanted to launch, which ended up being like Box Hot, which is just fun, outrageous, loud, just really hit it hard. And once that brand business started developing, then like now we have a proper team. I mean, I have an in-house group of designers. I have a creative director, Amanda. She's been great. She joined us, 2.5 years ago. She's like just as ADD as I am. And if you get us into a room for long enough, like we'll have enough ideas to last us like 5 years. But she brings them all to life. I've got a marketing team, a sales team, like it's all in-house now. And it's like a fully, there's a bunch of people that come from CPG backgrounds here.
What was that itch though, that you were saying is like, you knew early on that you'd have to go? Was there a feeling? Was it part of the profitability index of saying like, hey, we're giving up too much margin in this process? What was that feeling that made you think that we had to take this step?
It was realizing that I really enjoy like designing products, right? I was sitting on all these, like that was one of it. I was sitting on all these calls with these LPs, and it turned out like it ended up being like more so like me inventing the products for them and then saying, yeah, that sounds good. Like we'll get one of those, instead of them coming and saying, here's our idea. So I was like, oh, okay. So like we actually have the good ideas. Like I didn't know that I was good at that. Right. And through kind of pitching business and winning business, I'm like, no, I actually love this. This is super fun. The part that wasn't fun wasn't like controlling your own destiny is really nice. Like having a revenue stream that you're fully in control of. Like the B2B business back then in particular was very frustrating, really piecemeal, like, it comes and goes and you're like, okay, I need something that I can forecast, that I can count on. And then, yeah, by the way, the margin is higher if you do it right. And so it was just like, it was everything. It was interest, control, economics, like enterprise value, right? A manufacturer can only ever reach a certain enterprise value. Brands ultimately are what's going to succeed. Distillate is a commodity, right? But a well put together vape that tastes good, that's in a nice piece of hardware, is not a commodity. Yeah, it's just an evolution. It's been awesome though. It's been fun.
Do you think that your guys' brands will expand first, or do you think that you'll expand manufacturing into another location first?
So we already have a second facility. So we have several brands now. So Box Hot is our, top brand. We have number one vape market share with that brand, and top three on infused pre-rolls. We have Debunk, which is really focused on kind of like high tech. Like it's really championing these liquid diamond kind of more premium things for us. We have Rizzlers, which is like a closed loop. Play, which is fun, vibrant, next gen consumer. So we have a very broad portfolio. Like we're the sixth largest LP in Canada in terms of market share. We're number one in vape by like a mile. I think 21%. I think the next highest last month was like 10%. So our brands are driving us forward, but so is the bulk B2B business. Like a lot of people we have no problem making stuff for other people. I mean, we're not going to have 90% of the vape market, but presumably I could have 90% of like the oil that goes into the vape market. So like that's something that we look at. But they go hand in hand. We got that next site. That's really driven by that. What drove that was we're shipping, 500,000, 600,000, 650,000 like units a month. So we needed more warehousing, more packaging room. And so that's what that facility in London has enabled us to like really expand.
Do you guys want to control manufacturing for all of your brands moving forward, or would you want to do the white label thing with a trusted partner? Is that something you guys have talked about in terms of like expanding into the States with just your brands with like a low capital expenditure?
Yeah, within Canada, we're going to control what we do, and we're increasingly controlling what we do. Like we're taking more control over the infused pre-rolls. Like that predominantly, we used to outsource all of our rolling, some of our infusion. Now that balance is shifting. So it's really like part of our success has been the control to take margin and to have no surprises, or at least, once there's a surprise, you can get to the bottom of it because you can just walk in and be like, hey,
solution.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's been nice. In terms of beyond Canada, yeah, I think it's going to have to be a different approach, man. I mean, we don't have the balance sheet to go up and start buying like manufacturing facilities. So it would have to be like a strategic alignment with a bigger US MSO, whatever it is, bigger cannabis company, bigger tobacco company. But yeah, 100%. We're already looking at, we're going to probably have our first international export in like the next 6 weeks of THCA. So bulk is starting to happen for us. Taking brands to other markets, that's a whole different beast that I believe we would need like a strong strategic partner to do in a big way. But like we've got a great portfolio of brands and like really good technology IP. So we can get in there and like launch these things really well. Just finding that right partner. We've been toying around with that a bit, having conversations, but it's a big thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects there. There's the trust aspect from a consumer standpoint, right? Because when a consumer buys a product, there's an expectation behind that. But there's also the producing of that product, which I think people don't understand the complications behind that and how difficult that is. Because the one aspect you alluded to is the supply chain and how like low grade products in makes a very difficult process to have high grade products out.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know what it's like in some of the States, but in Canada, if you hit a certain clog rate on a vape, they'll shut your listings down. They'll stop selling them at the provincial level. So it's a big task, right? And white label has been tricky, right? Like our white label business has contracted a lot because it's a tricky business. A lot of these big brand names from the States came up to Canada. None of them have really like done anything substantial or with any longevity. And a lot of the bigger LPs tried to go asset light, and that's worked in some cases, but in other cases, like the people that they bet on went under. And, so we've been just kind of like, we always we've been trying new things by outsourcing, and then we strategically like de-risk as we prove that we can sell the thing, that it's like a viable product category, then we start de-risking and increasing our margins. But going to the States, it's a whole nother story, man. Very expensive and a big thing, but we've got the brands. Like we've got the tech. Like throw us in any lab and we'll make it better in like a month. Easy.
Is there any labs you're speaking to specifically?
I mean, not that it's worth mentioning. It's just so high level at this point, right? No, we're open. Like people reach out to us, we entertain the conversations, and so far we haven't really gotten deep, just because of like we still have a lot of headroom in Canada. Like I think we need somebody to really get integrated with us to take what we have outside of these borders.
Have you considered expanding into cultivation?
No.
Like not thought about it at all?
I've thought about like I have a model and like a theory and a concept for buying like an outdoor grow just to secure like high yield, like low cost supply. So like that's something we talk about, and we monitor the supply environment in Canada. The oversupply is so vast that we've got a lot of run room there on the extraction grade, and then like to think that we could ever grow good craft flower is just ridiculous. Like It's ridiculous. It's just, they couldn't be more different than what we do. So no, like we have no ambitions to enter flower. We have a lot of ambitions. Like we're really heavy in infused pre-rolls. And then now that we're like able to roll our own and we buy so much cannabis, we could presumably get into like pretty good non-infused pre-rolls. So that's part of we like engineering things. Like I don't like my product quality to be dictated by like the sun. I want, it's not something I can control. Like I want to be like, okay, 65% yield. Like I want to see the data, and we like engineered products, right? So growers, they know how to grow, and we partner with them. We love partnering with them, and it's great.
Are there any differences from US and Canada that, let's say, most listeners who might likely are in the US are just unfamiliar with? It can either be internally from an operational standpoint or like externally from a consumer facing standpoint.
Oh, there's so many differences. And then like pick a state, right? Like every state's a different universe too, right? But broadly speaking, a lot of barriers to entry in Canada, which are hard now if you're new or you're trying to get here, but very good if you've established a certain amount of scale, right? Like I can't just like sell something to a retailer. I have to convince the government distributor that I'm a good supplier, that I'm going to be consistent, that I'm going to hit the quality specs that Health Canada's hit, that I'm going to like keep them in stock. And that relationship is something we've built over, 20 product calls over the last 4 years with each of these provinces. Like we know these people personally. And so that's really a huge advantage for us here, right? Like in terms of marketing, it's very stringent. It's very stringent. And the bigger you get, the less you can play around and try to push the boundaries, or even within bounds, like people complain, like your competitors will just complain, say, hey, this seems like it's too much. And then Health Canada will, tell you to back off. And that's fine, right? Like I think a lot of people see that as a negative, but it's a level playing field. And you have to win on the ground. Like you have to win with your TMs at the store level. You have to win with the relationships with the retailers. Like you have to like convince the people that own the stores, that work in the stores, that this is the right product for them to sell to their consumer, which is very different. Like I can't throw up a ton of billboards and just hype people up, right? So that's a big difference. And then just the quality side of it, right? Like Canada started very stringent, which I think has been really good. So if you're looking at like the States, if you started in kind of the Wild West, and as the states federally legalize and they implement, I assume more strict legislation, like we've all cracked the code on Health Canada, which is not an easy thing to crack. So I think we operate at a higher degree of like, batch records and quality and sustainably doing that, right?
Yes, you have to follow like Health Canada, CGMP, like normal manufacturing requirements, versus in the US that just wasn't a thing because there's no federal oversight. So I couldn't agree more. And I think that there's going to be a lot of operators in the States that it turns out it's really hard to change habits. And if you have been doing something that is not okay for a long time by the CGMP guidelines, getting the whole thing to change and all of that it's going to be a heck of a journey for them for sure.
Oh yeah. You have to live in that environment to understand how to
Yes.
optimize. Like something as simple as when we started, we thought we had to like the way just we even cleaned equipment, it killed my utilization by like 75%. And through like interpreting the regs and changing the way we operate, we were able, like we just now know how to meet the GPP, not GMP, GPP, without shutting down the lab every other day, right? Like that alone is massive. Like if we didn't figure that out, I'd be running at like 30% of the output. So I think Canada's operators, the good ones, are best prepared to take on this like global legalization from like a regulatory standpoint. Probably not from a marketing standpoint. Like you'd want that US like beef behind the marketing, I think. But like the manufacturing and the like, how to navigate regs, like I think we're miles ahead, a lot of them.
You have your eyes on Europe a little more aggressively with any upcoming news you want to share?
We didn't even have the bandwidth to really think about it. And it's been almost falling in our lap, and it fell in our lap a couple of times to then it became a strategy. To be quite frank, right? Like you hear a lot of things about international, and historically it's been a lot of flower and we don't participate, but the THCA side of it and the THC free isolates that we make, like CBN, CBG, but really THCA, there seems to be a big path to getting that out internationally. So we've got a path into Ireland. We're exploring paths into Australia. It's strange, right? Like in some instances, you don't need to have GMP through the whole value chain, and in others you do. So we're even looking at like, do we build a small GMP room that focuses on like a subset of products so that we can export these things? But yeah, it's becoming increasingly every week, it's becoming more of part of what we're talking about. Because, man, if I can sell like a kilo of something for $10,000 and crack that code, it'll be nice little bump for sure.
How much do you enjoy the kind of reading the regulations, looking at the board, and kind of trying to figure out the best way to like get product A over here in the most efficient manner?
I leave so the international stuff I leave to my head of regulatory because it's pretty deep in the weeds.
Smart.
Like that stuff's heavy, and I don't have the time to do that. But what I do like to do is look for the opportunities in like the product design side of things. Like that's really fun, right? Like it's like that's how we came up with 1.2 gram vapes, which like really took us to number one. Back then, everybody was making 1 gram vapes at 85%, which is 850 milligrams of THC. But the reg said you can do 1,000 milligrams of THC. So we're like, hey, nobody's doing this. Like, why? You can make a bigger vape, then like you can like make that a differentiator, and we did that with Box Hot. So that stuff I like. It's fun. Like when you can crack the code on like what the consumer wants and something that nobody's ever made, and you can own a market. Like we launched 2 gram vapes in Canada that are 50% THC, and we have 99.8% of the 2 gram vape market right now, and it's like. It's awesome. Like it's nice to create a category, right?
There's a lot of advanced math you're doing over there.
Yeah, man. It's no time, but it gets the job done.
It's that spreadsheet he keeps talking about.
I mean, it's the whole team's committed, right? That's the big thing for us is the transparency to the financials, and like we aren't rewarded for market share without profit. And even even the comps, everything the way it's set up, like more than half my comp is based on like EBITDA. Like it's all just set up to drive profitability and growth. And I have my investor group to thank for that. They're like very disciplined serial entrepreneurs, like all of them pretty much, which has been great.
Is this the first business you've kind of started and then ran, or growing up as a child where there are other businesses like a lemonade stand that you kind of took to and you knew like this was kind of be the path down the road you would go to?
I didn't know. No, like I didn't know that I was I didn't know that I was entrepreneurial until I started working and realized I hate like not being able to do what I want to do, and I hate red tape. And then I got a little taste of entrepreneurship. Like me and a buddy bought 2 income properties right out of school, and it was like we did really well on them. And I'm like, okay, so I spent like 10 hours on this and made like twice my salary. And you're like, oh, this is fun, right? Like if you can find a solution to something, like it's just so much more creative. So no, I mean, I didn't really start exploring the idea of being an entrepreneur until I was like in my 20s, 22, 23. But I think I've always been kind of like very tolerant of risk. Like I'm not afraid of taking risks. Like to me, it felt more risky to just like stay as an engineer than it did to like leave and join this crazy like cannabis is getting legalized. Like how insane is that? like I want to be part of this. Like this is going to be fun, right? So this is the first real thing though, man. 0 to 100 real quick. Like did not think my first venture would be like 300 people in like a highly regulated environment making vapes for the whole country.
What is the most expensive lesson you've ever learned?
Oh man, dude, you learn them every day. You learn them every hour sometimes. Most expensive lesson? When you're coming up, is this weird like imposter syndrome thing? Like, who am I, right? And you put a lot of people or companies or other things on a pedestal, right? Because you're like, well, if they're doing this, like, what do I know? But the reality is like, if you're questioning it, you got to like trust your instincts. So like the compounding effect of like not having that confidence early on, like you got to gain that confidence really quickly. Like now I'm like very confident in my decisions, and it's like I don't give a shit about what anybody else is doing. I'm doing what I'm doing, and it's like I'm only looking just in so much to see if they're like ankle biters or strategically attacking me. But like this is my thing now. But early days, you're very much like, well, this LP is worth $1 billion. Like they must know what's going on. So you got to get over that as an entrepreneur really quickly. Doesn't matter who they are, the market share, and now I've seen it. I've seen things that were a $1 billion market share now that are bankrupt. Like it's just exploded. And so I'd say that's probably the one.
Are there any challenges or opportunities internally that you would like an entrepreneur that is building a product to consider in mind? The goal of this would be entrepreneurs listening to this podcast, always building products on a regular basis. There might be an idea or something that you're facing on a regular basis that you say, hey, like if someone was building this, reach out to me immediately. This would be a big helpful add to me.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, we're starting to like insource it and build it ourselves. And we built out the sales finance team. But if it was like 6 months ago and somebody came to me with a solution that amalgamated a bunch of data sets, like it's all about data, right? Like, so in Canada, I mean, there's quite a bit, right? And it's all fragmented. You've got the data coming from big retailers, you got data coming from provinces, you got some website scrubbing. So really, I mean, at the end of the day, like, there's a huge opportunity for somebody to come in, understand the sources of data, and amalgamate them and like build insights reports for companies that are, oh man, if you came to us 6 months ago, we would have hired you. And we were the sixth biggest, and I'm sure like I'd still hire you to accelerate what I'm trying to do. Right? You have to like understand every single move you make now. Like, it's not worth going to all 3,000 stores. Like, what are the 20% of the stores that move 80% of the vape volume? Okay, like, how are we indexing in that store? Is Box Hot at 20% or 10%? Well, if we're 20% nationally, why are we 10% in these stores? Go talk to them. Like when you start digging deeper and deeper and deeper, you can start making more profitable decisions, right? Like, I don't need 800 territory managers to talk to every store every other day. I need 15 of them to talk to the top 25% twice a month, the next 25% once every 2 months. Like, it's all, that's huge right now. And it's a huge competitive advantage if you can harness it.
What question do you wish more people asked you?
I don't know. People ask me a lot of questions.
How are you?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing to talk about with entrepreneurship. I mean, I think a lot of, I'm good most of the time, but sometimes sometimes I'm really not good. Like, sometimes you're just, how many things are going to punch me in the face today? Like spread the punches out. I can take a lot of punches, but sometimes like it gets heavy, right? And it's like, I think the biggest thing there is like, the beauty of being an entrepreneur is like you hit those low points so much that they just become like, you can just dissociate from them and be like, okay, this is just for like now. So that's what maybe some advice. It's like, find your thing that breaks that. Like, when you're going to that pit, what's that thing that breaks that thought process? And for me, it's just like a bike ride and a hot tub sesh and like a beer. And I'm like good as new. Like, everything's fine. Like, I was just tripping out for a second. It's good. Let's keep moving forward. Right? Like,
It's perfect. It's like restarting the whole system.
I love it.
just go away for 10 hours, man. The world's not ending. It's at the end of the day, it's just vapes. Chill out. Like, wake up. It's fine.
Dream vape session, 3 people, dead or alive.
Oh, okay. I want Anthony Kiedis. So like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Definitely want them there. I got to go with like Sebastian Maniscalco, like a good comedian. Like, I want like a good musician. I want a good comedian. And then maybe it'd be good to get like a nice like a good scientist, like get like Einstein in there. And like, so you got like Einstein, you got a musician, and then you can have a really deep conversation about what is cannabis with those guys.
When you got started in the cannabis space, what did you get right? Most importantly, what did you get wrong?
I think what I got right was being open-minded, and I'm a big proponent of like, be careful of like sunk cost fallacy, right? Like, just because you said something like before, like doubling down isn't necessarily the answer. Like, yeah, you said you're going to make edibles, like don't, and now you see that you shouldn't make, a $100 million investment in edibles, like don't do it, like change your mind. So I being okay to be like, either, I guess like a hypocrite, it's just being okay to pivot, right? And being okay to be wrong. And in fact, if you're not finding that you're wrong every 3 months, like you're not thinking about things enough. I think that was key. I think probably the biggest thing I got wrong was you have to like always hedge your bets, right? So when things take off, like do not take your eye off of the other elements of your business, right? Like the crazy, you might hit it big once in a while, but like immediately you got to go into like hedging it. And so I've learned that lesson a couple of times, right? It's like, okay, let the thing that's taking off go, but like it's not going to last. So like immediately go to de-risking. Early days, that's a tough one to like really learn and understand.
Yeah, no, that was perfectly said. All right, prediction time. Mario, as consumption methods and products evolve over time, how is Motif Labs planning to stay ahead of these trends?
Well, one thing we definitely do well is innovate. So, I mean, it's everything coming together, right? So data is a key, right? But data only tells you, what what's there and what's not there. Then you need that like intuition that you build via, just exposure, right? So we have a huge team. Like I'm out in stores a lot. My creative director is in stores all the time. Like the people that are responsible for coming up with like what are we making and why go to trade shows, they go to the States, we talk to our customers, we talk to our retailers. So you have to pair data with intuition, and then you have to pick the right technologies, right? Like we saw liquid diamonds. Look, potency drives sales. People want something that isn't distillate for whatever reason. They want it. They like it. We decided to focus on THCA when a lot of people started focusing on THCV or THCP, or these things that are like a little bit too far in the future, right? So it's like our philosophy has always been R&D with the purpose of commercializing at scale, not R&D with the purpose of like, getting some sort of a patent that's going to like make us billionaires 20 years from now. Like that's how we run our business, right?
Kellen.
I mean, my opinion has always been, I think that the majority of mainstream adoption is going to be from all these other form factors that aren't smokable flower. And
Yeah.
I mean, liquid diamonds that go in a vape cart, right? Yeah, you can inhale it, but you can also take those and put them in drinks and edibles and mints and sprays and topicals and any other form factor that a consumer could imagine ingesting. And so I think Motif will be perfectly positioned to at least create and supply all of these other form factors as the industry kind of moves forward without the whole, we've had conversations in society that smoking isn't super great for you, right? So
I mean, yeah, to get a little less philosophical with it, like for sure on the vape side, what we can put into it has already been figured out for the most part. You got live resin, you got liquid diamond, you got distillate. Like you get more potent than liquid diamond. So now it's going to be the delivery mechanisms. Like I've always been a big hardware guy. I think there's a lot of differentiation and innovation in like the hardware and the tech there and like the control, but not control for the sake of overcomplicating. Like it has to be well priced, but just keep elevating either the way it looks, feels, or functions. And 100% agree. Like I'm shocked. I'm still shocked. Like early day, like, where's the CBD in the protein powder? Like, why is that not taking off? Like, where's the where's that nice mixture of CBN in a nighttime sleepy tea? Like these things have barely scratched the surface. And as like the aging population turns over, and as we're able to sell some of these non-THC things in like other outlets, I think the market's going to like blow up for those. But I'm waiting for the day where Health Canada allows non-THC products into natural health products. Because the second you can put like a little smoothie mix in like in a grocery store, it's going to be a whole different world.
You're all over it.
Oh, yeah, we've got all the things. We know how to make all of our things water soluble. We know how we would mix powders. We know how to fill powder. Like we have it all. It's just when and how and
when
where.
are we going to get the inhalable, like for the asthma inhalable? You know what I'm talking about, like a compressed contained. And why is it?
I don't know. We launched one with a partner. They used like the inhalable technology, and they instead of like making it like a puffer, they made it like a spray.
Yeah,
it's just
not
the market's not ready. It's just they're not ready for it. We weren't allowed to flavor it. I think that's key in Canada. Like we couldn't put like really good flavors into it. It's just regs and timing and exposure. Like dude, it's crazy, man. People that I thought were like, my quote unquote stoner friends, they still barely know what's going on. Like we're still just in the beginning innings of like what people believe like cannabis to be. And like, I firmly believe that a huge portion of the sales is still coming from people that have always been heavy into it. And it's like way less of these new adopters than we think. Like there's a long way to go. But man, the young people are entering adulthood really quickly. Their preferences are totally different, and it's going to change pretty fast.
I love it. Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to end, and I think you hit the nail on the head. So, Mario, for our listeners, they want to get in touch, they want to learn more about Motif, and they want to purchase some products. Where can they find you?
Well, you can only purchase products through regulated retailers in Canada. So come up and, go. We have something in like 95% of the stores. So go to pretty much any store and you'll see a Motif product. Our website, motiflabs.ca. I mean, I'm just Mario Naric. I'm open on social, and yeah, reach out, check out our brands, check out what we're doing, and feel free to reach out if you want to collaborate in any way. If you want to, take our tech south of the border out in Europe, like we're open to combos.
Love it. We'll link it all to the show notes. Thanks for taking the time. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks so much, guys.